Okay, next this is informational. We've been looking forward to this reveal here. Deputy Superintendent Scott Jones, are you ready to come up and hopefully not repeat your previous performance? You're going to have a bunch of staff up on this. I know there's a lot of fingerprints on this, and we're going to turn the time over to you, Deputy Superintendent Jones, and you can lead in with your staff and dive right in your presentation. I've just got to step out for one moment. Vice Chair Davis will take charge here for just a sec. Be right back.
Thank you, Madam Chair, Deputy Superintendent of Operations Scott Jones. The intent of 6.1 is to basically present to you the detailed scorecard. We've used that term in the past, or the document that essentially tracks your requests, all the public education funding requests that you made or that were made, the results of it. This is the detailed version of this. The reason why we do this is because, for example, next year you may ask, okay, of all the proposals we made, how much got funded? So it's a record-keeping process as well to ensure that we're able to identify and make improvements to the processes. We'll be talking more about that later in later meetings because, we come right out of the legislative session and we're right back into it again, right back into the planning and processes that result in such good results as we are going to demonstrate to you here. And then Deputy Superintendent Stallings follows with the summary, and those products are typically what we use to go out when we're visiting USBA meetings, things like that. So this is just public facing for now, but not something we hand out or anything. It, again, is intended to be a record of the process from start to finish of your requests, and then the results all the way through our process to the proposal you make to the governor's office under the requirement of the Budgetary Procedures Act, then ultimately to PEA, from PEA to EAC, and then final. So with that, Madam Chair, I'd like to turn it over to School Finance Director Sam Uri and his staff, who were monumental in tracking all this. Again, also with other members of our fantastic team here within the USBE, program staff and financial staff alike. So Sam can walk you through it, orient you to it, and make sure that you see the results of the legislative session from a funding request or funding perspective.
Thank you. Director Uri.
Yes, thank you, Deputy Superintendent Jones. Sam Uri, School Finance Director. Great to be with you. There are 79 line items here, and only 4 of them are for USDB. So we won't go through all of them. We want to keep you awake, but just will note on the total dollar amount comparison here on the left, USBE and this entire sheet here is new money requests, whether they're one-time or ongoing. So USBE requested a total of $970 million, so nearly $1 billion in new money. The governor recommended $620,000. I will note that PEA the Public Education Subappropriations Committee did not put a dollar amount on the education stabilization funds, and that's why they're so much lower. But then our final new funding, both one-time and ongoing, is $590,000. So nearly $600,000. Million. Thank you. All of those totals are millions. I apologize. It's difficult. Some of these smaller line items are in the thousands, and so we didn't want to drop those off, but just these bigger numbers at the top are all in millions. So quickly here, the top piece that you see, lines 1 through 4, came out of the base budget. So we funded enrollment growth at $23 million. The inflationary 5-year average increase on the WPU was $94 million. The statutory increase on the at-risk WPU add-on was $28 million, and USDB educator salary adjustments were $812,000. As you know, USBE asked for $186 million total for the WPU value discretionary increase. And I will note that the column to the right of the green shading there has kind of a percentage that compares what USBE requested and what the final funding amount was. So there was a 33% reduction by, coming out of the final funding recommendation. But that gets us to a total of 6%. Was the total WPU increase.
And Madam Chair, if I could just interject at this point, the green column or the highlighted column with, or both with the column to the right indicates to you just how many of your 11 type priorities got funded.
Correct.
And to Sam's point, that's the key takeaway here is you made it, like, for example, or he just gave it to you really, but others you'll see where for example, for the market salary adjustments, you requested 6 million or over 6 million. And the final result was 600,000 plus amount. And then in the notes, we really try to make sure that we're in as summary way as possible, identifying what exactly that amounts to. For example, with the market adjustments, or I'm sorry, with the FTE request, there was 11 total FTE requested, but 5 were funded. And then we try to inventory that for you here, so you see specifically where we landed, even in more detail. And that's, again, why we say that this purpose of this chart is really a lot of the details, and then the summaries follow this or from it, that we share with the field and with like superintendents and USBA meetings and et cetera. So back to Sam, if we may, ma'am.
Very good. Yeah, so on USBE's funding priorities, here you see the additional at-risk WPU add-on increment request was not funded. All-day or full-day kindergarten was funded partially at $12.2 million. There was no line item that made it out of PEA into reducing curricular and co-curricular fees. Legislation to that end also was put on hold. There was no additional funding outside of statutory increases for transportation. Beverly Taylor Sorensen Arts in All Schools was partially funded at $4.2 million. The small district and charter school based funding was funded out of the stabilization fund, and we've, on the notes column, we've shaded in yellow any funding that has come out of the stabilization fund. So there were several smaller line items in addition to the bigger line items that were funded with the stabilization fund. As Deputy Superintendent Jones mentioned, market adjustments, USBE requested $6.3 million, and we were funded at $670,000. The total dollar amounts on critical USBE FTEs were 54% lower. We got the 5 positions total. If there are questions from board members on line item 14 here, this one's a little bit misleading in that there is still money for this for the Center for Continuous School Improvement, but there's some transfers going on and some things like that. Lastly, flexible educator-directed preparation collaboration time. USBE asked for $60 million one time, and we were funded at $64 million one time from the stabilization fund. So one of the bigger pieces of the stabilization fund.
So, I'm sorry, Madam Chair, if we could so we wanted to, in preparation for this, I know that we're under a time here too, so we wanted just to make sure that we covered your top 11 priorities, but we'll open it up now to questions or concerns at your direction. I just do want to add that, so from here, providing you this level of detail, is essential or important to you to have this as we progress together. So starting next month in Finance Committee is where we put in front of the Finance Committee our budget for next year for them to vet. And then it, depending on if there's any issues or questions or concerns, if they pass that out with a favorable recommendation, your budget will come to you, the entire public education budget will come to you for your review and approval as a whole board in May, right? So that we can set that, and because, as you know, our LEAs are really dependent on this process that we're following with you here today, and our insurance that, so for example, we had planned to attend the USSA meeting in April, where we'll share with the superintendents these types of outcomes, and then that process to do it, because they're simultaneously with you, they're trying to set their budgets and get to it. So we feel like we're in pretty good lockstep with them and their process. Maybe a little bit behind, than they would like us to be, but we'll make sure we're doing our best to hit their timelines and make sure that we're supporting their ability to meet the requirements of their boards and their budget proposals on the time hacks that they have. So.
Thank you, and thank
So
you.
we'll open up for questions.
Yeah,
Madam
thanks
Chair.
for your immense work during the legislative session, both of you and your whole team. Board Member Norton?
Yes, let me add my thanks to you as well. I did notice on some of these items down below item 15 that they were actually funded, in some cases significantly more than what we had requested. And you used a term just a minute ago, I don't know if that was rollover. No, it wasn't. But is there explanation for that? What is the background?
It really depends on the line item. It depends on legislators, or it depends on the Public Education Appropriations Subcommittee and what came out of that, and then what went into Executive Appropriations Committee. Is there a specific line item you wanted to address, or?
No, one that caught my eye was line item number 19 with the CPR and training that was more than double what we had asked for. And so is there something new that?
We tracked just under 300 bills as a team, and with substitutes, the most substitutes I saw was 6. So we probably submitted about 500 responses. I don't recall offhand the number of that bill, but my understanding was just that the legislature felt like it was important, and EAC
Gave a whole
decided to
bunch
fund
more
that
money
one.
for it.
Yeah, Madam Chair, if
Okay.
I may add to that too, just in that, Sam's spot on. In addition to what we request, if you follow the PEA process, they have what's called a request for appropriations from the legislators themselves. So it's typically during that process that you'll see these increases to even our own requests, or sometimes even entirely new requests. And so that's why we make sure to log all of this and track all of this so you can see the trends, or you can see the outcomes of the entire process. So it's not only just us going in front of PEA, I know you know this, but it's not only in front of us, or us going in front of PEA, but they also accommodate or push for the legislators. So to Sam's point, the particular request for the increase to that was something that, by way of the process, was felt to be important to get that particular funding into the LEAs. So.
And that's kind of, may I? That's
Yes.
kind of what I wondered, if some
Yeah.
of those bills were folded into
Right.
maybe an appropriation that we had asked for.
Right, and so, and that's why we were followed by the great Deputy Superintendent Stallings and her staff, like Jeff and all that too, so that they can further drill down with you on those particular bills, that do it. So it's really a great tandem here that we have, so synergy.
Great, thank you. Board Member Cannon?
Yes, would you please educate me on the Education Stabilization Fund? Like, how does income get into that fund? And are there any restrictions on its use? Because a lot of these things were funded from that particular fund.
Yes, so the Education Stabilization Fund came out of the, if you recall, the Amendment G process. So you can think of it as a rainy day for education to meet statutorily promised increases in the event of a recession. So what happens is those increases come in, and it's been about, so there was around about $250 million available there this year. So it's been about $125 million per year. There was nothing funded out of it for fiscal year 22 for this, in the prior legislative session. For fiscal year 21, that's where the COVID stipends, the educator stipends came from. So, we got to a point this year where we had $250 million in there, and the economy is still doing well. And so the thought was, well, maybe we can disperse some of that and address some needs that schools have. So, if you look at these yellow shaded in the notes areas, we mentioned the $64 million for educator-directed preparation hours and days. There's $91.5 million for public education capital and technology needs. That is distributed to all LEAs, including charters, but there's a base element to it where smaller school districts have a bigger base. And so if you're one of the smallest school districts, you'll get a little bit more of a percentage. Additionally, $50 million is going to be put in what's called the Small School Critical Capital Needs Fund. And so those are our smallest in counties of classes 4 through 6. Our smallest school districts will be able to, and Superintendent Dixon or her designee serves on that committee. Deputy Superintendent Jones or his designee serves on that committee, and there are a few appointees from the governor's office that will serve on that committee and provide grants and in some cases loans to small rural school districts. So those are some of the biggest distributions that have come out of that.
May I follow up?
Quick follow-up, we're going to
quick.
take
So I
two
understand
more
this is
questions.
all one-time money. Source of the money is from Amendment G, which is like a rainy day fund, more or less, for education. And we got 220 million from there. Do you have any feeling on how Amendment G has done in terms of supporting not only students with disabilities, but all people with disabilities? Has that been an expensive portion of that fund?
So, Chair, if I may?
Please.
So that's something else I'd have to send to you. I do have those numbers about how much came out for those. We can get those to you, to the entire board for the LFA, but we don't put it on here because it's not public education centric per se, right? We understand and recognize Board Member Cannon's question, though, that it still comes out of that, fund or, the funding for it. So we'll clarify that in a response.
Yeah,
to
my
the board.
concern is just that it seems like students with disabilities have never been adequately funded, particularly by the federal government. And it's always taken a lot of money from the locals to support that. And then Amendment G added all people with disabilities. So I'm just concerned about how consuming that portion that has to go to support that from Amendment G is becoming. So I'd appreciate an email.
Right. So, Madam Chair, if I could just clarify
Please.
her request for the information. So what you're seeking is how much money went to the Health and Human Services portion of the because, we do receive funding for disabled students, right? But you're looking for the funding that came or that was appropriated to the Health and Human Services as an example portion of it. Is that what I'm clear on?
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm just concerned that we have enough money to support the needs of those people.
Sure, yeah, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Board
no,
Member
I can do that.
Hanson?
Yep.
And my question actually is kind of tagging on to what Janet was just talking about. I wondered if we could look at the education fund and then just see what came out of the education fund. I mean, there's the traditional education money. We also had an income tax reduction that came out of that funding. The stuff that went to Health and Human Services. Just be interesting to me if maybe that's a way you could structure your email.
Okay.
It's just, here's the education fund and here's
Sure.
where it went, and that would show us the effects of Amendment G.
Right, and if I could just clarify something along that line, Madam Chair, we can, and we'd get it with, or work with the LFA to get that data. I just want to make sure that there is the process, though, as revenue comes in, that revenue could be channeled off before it hits the education fund. So I just want to make sure that, when, for clarity purposes, what we'll be providing is the data from the education fund. I don't necessarily have all of the movements of revenue that come before that revenue hits the education fund. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that, if that's acceptable.
Yes, thank you. I think I skipped Board Member Earl.
That's okay.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. The TSSA funds, I know Representative Last, that got changed a little bit. Is that accurate, or did it not in the end? Because he pulled back, right, some of the funding for property tax? I just wondered how that is the one thing, as I go around to schools, every time I walk in the door, the first thing they say is, thank you for the TSSA funding. So I just wanted to know the long-term impact on that. And I'm all for cutting property taxes, keep in mind, but I just wanted to know, does that mean that that's going away?
No.
No, okay.
Member Earl, if I can phone a friend to Deputy Superintendent Stallings, I'm not aware of any funding impacts to the Teacher and Student Success Act outside
So
of
that didn't okay.
outside of WPU increases, which would, last I checked, be about a 12% increase on the TSSA account for each LEA.
Okay.
So,
And I think it was because the property values, he was saying that there was bringing in more they expected. And so I just wanted to make sure that we weren't thinking, maybe we'll just move that program away.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, so if I could just clarify, I think Board Member Earl's kind of got two questions here. What were the results of the legislative session on the TSSA? They were good. That's what you're getting thanked for, is the 12%. When you're talking about the property tax piece of it and the legislation that Representative Last put in, that, and Angie can correct me if I'm wrong, but that bill didn't pass. Did not pass, okay, thanks, okay. So good. So the resulting 12% was by way of another process, right? By way of the WPU increments and that. We can break that down for you, but overall, the TSSA did well, right? Right, yes, ma'am. It did not pass. Okay. All right. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Okay, wonderful. We appreciate your presentation. We're grateful for all of your hard work, and we are going to break for lunch. We'll reconvene here at 1:30. Board members' lunch is provided in the back hall.